Well, it's the old Talladega Nights, right? Talladega Nights. Hey, driver, I love you.
Hey, driver, drive these.
Yeah, please be of age. Yeah,
but that happens a lot, right? And if you're some guy who is just playing small town hockey and all of a sudden these things start happening to you, it is easy to fall into how great that is, right? That is give me a piece of that. And that is the path to you getting divorced and you losing a lot of your money.
Well, I brought it up before, Varsity Blues. The girl even admitted, she goes, you're my ticket out of here. Man.
I think you just made Talladega Nights click in as that is the textbook example of avoid that.
Yeah.
But sometimes you don't know, right? Sometimes it's super obvious, but sometimes it ain't obvious at all. And sometimes listen, if you're having kids with someone, right, that generally doesn't happen on the first date, right? There's some investment that's being made to develop a relationship and be with you for a while and maybe have 2 or 3 kids, right? So how are you judging that? How are you getting through that? I mean, that is a long-term series of some kind of relationship. You've got to navigate that. You've got to be careful. It is not the person who is, flashing their shirt after a game. That's easy.
Yeah. Is that one of those things where, like you mentioned, if you're an athlete, you have to treat yourself as if you're special because you're a target. If you're that athlete with that status, that cash, that fame, and the missus or the lady who's trying to, I guess, reproduce with you, she has that clock that's ticking down that we really don't have for the most part. And so, okay, well, there's another avenue that she could take advantage if she has baby rabies.
I mean, it's a factor, obviously. The clocks are different. I mean, it's really interesting. I've got some clients where both spouses were professional athletes. And so that creates a whole interesting dynamic with the relationship and how they treat each other and their off seasons and how they're planning on having families. I mean, that's a whole different, weird, interesting, really interesting dynamic. I think it helps them understand each other a little bit better. But even then, I mean, you're talking about dramatically disproportionate numbers in terms of salaries. I mean, there just aren't very many female athletes making as much as professional men athletes. They can do well, but that's an issue.
Is that why, kind of like with celebrity actors, they try to find other actors, musicians find musicians, athletes find athletes?
At least you understand each other a little bit more, at least the industry, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it happens sometimes, but there's certainly plenty of examples of people who've come out and said, I never want to date it. Celebrities who say, I never want to date a celebrity. You can never tell their intentions. Are they using me for marketing purposes to help prop up their own careers? It's complicated.
So there is no right answer.
Well,
there's never.
When we had Rich Cooper on the last episode, I mentioned something where I said that my wife and I, she was a very successful model and she decided to give up that career in order to raise our children. And she has been doing that for the past 13 years and I give her full credit. And Rich said, because I said to her, she's got the hardest job in the world of, raising the family and taking care of the house. And he pitched the idea of, is it really that hard? And I went home and I thought about that. And I'd like to bring it to you to see what you think. And I think the reason why it has the tag of hardest job in the world is the three of us go out, we work, we see benefits from that within 2 weeks, right? We get a paycheck, we're able to take that. Where being a stay-at-home mom, the long-term investment is 20, 30 years down the road when you see that human being rise to their full potential, and most of the credit goes towards that stay-at-home mom, the one that had that nurturing household, that had the function of no, this is the way you do things at home, this is how you raise a house. And because there's no immediate payoff week to week to week or month to month to month or even year to year, that's where it becomes the hardest job in the world, because the payoff is way down the road. It's way down the road. And I think sometimes maybe we don't recognize that, the sacrifice that the women put in, and even in these situations that we've been talking about, is that maybe they just don't feel appreciated. Like, hey, I decided to step away from my career. Like, I could have gone on and been A, B, or Z in a career, but instead we decided to focus on yours. I took a back seat, and maybe that's where some of that visceral hate comes from down the road, and that's why we have these really ugly divorces. I'm just bringing out ideas here, but I think sometimes we're not giving enough credence to what they go through being the second banana.
I mean, I think when you think about what your value as an employee, right? Forget about being a professional athlete, really any kind of employee. What is your value? You judge that often by the paycheck that you're bringing home. And I think one of the reasons, forget about long-term payoff, when you're a spouse who's at home taking care of the kids, and sometimes it's the male in the relationship, no one's paying you for that, right? but it's hard. You've got to set your own schedule, right? You're not just sitting on the couch eating bonbons all day. There's things that have to get done. You've got to set your own schedule. You've got to stay on the ball. Now you add all the things that go into a professional athlete, right? So we see pretty frequently that the athlete is off doing their athlete things, right? Working out, team activities, playing, all of that. It leaves the spouse at home to deal with the lawyer, the financial advisor, buying the house, dealing with the house when you get traded, dealing with the dogs, dealing with the kids. That's a lot. And no one's paying you for that. And so I think the mentality sometimes is, well, that's literally not a job because you're not getting paid. When in reality, it is the hardest job because you're not getting paid, right? If you were getting half of someone's salary to do that job, then that would be different. But I think when you start thinking about, well, if the spouse didn't do that and we hired people, right, a nanny, a this, a that, it's a lot you're going to shell out to deal with all that. And instead, it's your spouse who's dealing with it. It's hard. It's important. And if that person does a bad job, it's going to have a lot of really negative effects for the athlete who either is going to have to do it on their own, which they probably don't have time to do, or start hiring people where now you've got to go through all the things of hiring people and background checks and they're going to be in your house dealing with your kids. Talk about sort of walking around and opportunities for criminality. It's a whole nother ball of wax.
Do you think to some degree, though, that when it comes to like the male-female dynamic, the old saying, it's harsh again, but a man will trade his happiness for his family. Sometimes a woman will trade her family for her happiness. And if you have her taking care of the family, well, I'm not getting paid. Like you mentioned, real delayed gratification. If she's not in it for the long-term goal of we're making something more important than us, the kids, the family, she might pull the pin on that. But also, to counter Rich's point, I would argue that like the game has changed. It's probably just as hard to find a woman who's willing to stay at home and commit to the family as it is to find a man who's willing to provide, with how much the game has changed and how everybody thinks they have endless options.
And how do you know when you're getting in the relationship? And how do you know what someone's motives are, right? You can't read, even Elon Musk still can't read someone's mind. Certainly not accurately.
He's working on it. He's working on it.
I know they're working on it, but at least today, you can't do it. And so you're relying on what your eyes are telling you, what your heart is telling you, which lies to you a lot, what you're seeing and observing. But even then, people can hide their motivations. You got to trust yourself. You got to be really careful. You got to make good decisions because at the end of the day, you got to be accountable to yourself. But it's hard. Relationships in general are hard. But now you add all the metrics that go into a professional athlete. It's all the harder.
We do a hockey podcast called Sling the Biscuit every single Sunday. The clips, the bite-sized chunks are right here. Only the hits, the full-length show, which you don't want to miss, is right here. That's Dave. I'm Travis. We'll see you soon.